Hi, my name is Nathasya.
My name is Hosea. My name is Yovan Aurelius.
The three of us are from Bandung Institut of Teknologi, which is located in Indonesia. We are coached by Ma'am Ikha Magdalena, and in this video we would like to answer problem B, which is titled Punishing Infants. We hope that you enjoy this video.
The problem we are going to discuss in this time is arises from the fact that there is a human nature to punish people who stands out. We are interested in modeling the dynamics of human population where there are aggressive and non-aggressive people. Then there are people with different preference in acting out against aggressive people. In general, there are two methods to act against third party, punishment or corrective action. We are going to answer these questions. First, how do people from different groups interact? Second, what factors impact the long-term stability of a society? Third, what happens when a group with a method of acting against aggressive people other than punishment arises? And the last, what happens when there are different levels of actions that are preferred by a group? To answer the question, we will formulate the mathematical model. We will use agent-based modeling approach to model dynamics of human behavior in acting out towards aggressive people. Human population will be categorized into two states which follow an SIS model. The attributes of a person, which is represented by numbers, will change by following ordinary differential equations. There are some assumptions that we use. First, human population is constant. There is no birth and death. Humans will be categorized into two states, aggressive or non-aggressive. There are only two methods to act out against aggressive people, punishment and corrective action. For each time that people interact, action towards aggressive people will be held and people's preference will be influenced. Next, for aggressiveness change, we will assume that corrective action is more effective in turning aggressive people to non-aggressive. Every person's aggressiveness will grow due to internal factor. An aggressive person's aggressiveness will be suppressed by external factor. And for preference change, we will assume that every person has an internal factor that determines their susceptibility to external belief system. So I will explain about the mathematical model we use to define the agent. First, each agent will has attribute called aggressiveness, which dependent in time and the value is between 0 and 1. 0 represents a person that will not act aggressively at all towards other, while 1 represents the opposite. Second, there is an attribute called preference in punishment and corrective action, where if the value of PP is larger than PC, then the person prefers punishments than corrective action. Next, each person will adopt a state, either aggressive or non-aggressive, and it will be dependent to the value of A. To model of the dynamics of aggressiveness and preference, we will use logistic equations. For aggressiveness, the differential equation is as given. Here, D is represents nature of aggressiveness and this term represents growth of aggressiveness due to internal nature. The next term is represents suppression of aggressiveness where it will happens due to external actions such as punishment and corrective action. The probability of action that they will experience is determined by the number of people that favors a method. Next model for the dynamics of preference is given. The first term represents change due to external factor that is herd instinct and successfulness of a method. And the second term represents change due to internal factor that is someone's personal belief.
For the simulation, the parameters that we used are as given. We will play around with the value of alpha, beta, and the proportion of population regarding aggressiveness and preference. So here are the results of the simulation, with varying the proportion of initial aggressive people, where the alpha is 0.3 and beta is 0.8, with the same proportion of preference on both action. From all of the cases, all of the group become stable, and the society also becomes stable in the end, where the non-aggressive people is more dominant, and both of the population oscillate. This oscillation is reduced when we enlarge the population number. See also that when aggressive people haven't dominated the society at the start, the number of aggressive people grows for a while to wait for the more efficient method, which is corrective action, dominate the population. And in the third case, the conversion towards corrective action is much slower since the number of aggressive people are still dominating, resulting a smaller effect of successfulness in turning aggressive to non-aggressive. We also do a simulation with varying the proportion of people preference to see what factor will influence the stability when aggressive people dominate at the start. From the result, when punishment dominates the society at the start, it tends to become unstable. The method fails to suppress the number of aggressive people. While as the proportion of corrective action gets larger, the society becomes stable more quickly with the larger number of non-aggressive people. We are also interested to see the possibility of the dominance in preference change. As in this simulation, we use 60% aggressive population with alpha is 0.3 and varying the population of corrective action and beta. The results show when the corrective population is slightly smaller than the punishment population, where the gap is 5% in the example, corrective population can still dominate the population in the long run. However, it falls when the gap becomes larger, for example by 10%. And for the second case, when we increase the effectiveness parameter of corrective action, or beta, corrective action beats punishment in the long run, where we can see the result in picture 1 and picture 3.
Next, we are interested to portray different levels of action in both punishment and corrective action. First, we set some assumptions. Punishment and corrective action can effectively reduce someone's internal nature of aggressiveness. Then, the effectiveness will be determined by the level of action, whereas the higher the level will give a better reduction. Next, there is a fixed proportion of people who prefer certain level of action in both punishment and corrective action population. By this, if the person is aggressive, their aggressiveness nature can be reduced with a probability of epsilon. For example, we choose 0.8 for our simulation by following this equation. Here are some results of our simulation where we choose 50% of population prefers corrective action at the start and 70% of the population are aggressive. For each cases, we can see that all groups are still stable in the long run. And if we shorten the simulation time to see the dynamics for each group clearly, we can see that there's actually no much difference in each cases. However, there are still some things to note. First, the oscillation of aggressive and non-aggressive population becomes reduced since people's aggressive growth is reduced too. Then number of aggressive people are reduced quickly and can easily reach 0. Lastly, as proportion of level 2 is higher, stability is reached slightly quicker. Next, we want to note an interesting case. In this case, we can see that when society prefers punishment in the long run, the society can still be stable, unlike the previous basic model. And next, we can move on to limitation and future directions. First, we would like to find parameters that are more realistic by using data or existing research. Then we would like to add a neutral group, a group that doesn't have any preference in acting out against aggressive people, and another method of action against aggressive people. Lastly, we would like to add another external factor that influences someone's preference other than successfulness. And to conclude our presentation, there are several points. First, aggressive people are influenced by the whole population who have preference of method in acting against them. Then people's preferences are affected by the other group by following the majority and successfulness of a method. Second, stability of society is influenced by the dominance of a more effective method. When the more effective method does not dominate, stability can still be reached when the value of the method's effectiveness is higher. Third, when different group arises, the population tends to follow the initial dominant population. However, when both populations are equal, population tends to turn into corrective action. In addition, with the increase of the successfulness parameter of corrective action, even though punishment population dominates at the start, we can still see the population converge to corrective action. Lastly, when there are different levels of action, there is no much difference that happens. However, preference dominance will also be preserved.